Hello and welcome to another action-packed, exciting hour of the Smoky Mountain Wrestling Rewatch Along Project. This is podcasting the way it used to be and the way you like it. This show is a production of the Something Else Podcasting Network, and it is episode number 077 of Smoky Mountain Wrestling from July 17th, 1993, taped June 28th, 1993, at the Council High School in Council, Virginia. My name is Arya, and joining me, as always, is the Drew McIntyre to my CM Punk. It's Trey. Trey, how do you like the taste of those friendship beads?
Does this mean you're gonna bust my head open with a toolbox?
Yes, it does. And I'm gonna fill your mouth with friendship bracelet beads.
That sounds all the spot that like skeeves me out the most of all the spots that's done in wrestling is when they do the thumbtacks in the mouth spot because I have like
Yeah.
a really horrible gag reflex and I just
hmm
imagine that like if someone did that to me, I would not be able to control myself from fucking swallowing a bunch of thumbtacks and vomiting everywhere.
Every time I see that spot or a similar spot, like with the friendship bracelet beads at the pay-per-view, um, I instinctively swallow. So yeah, I know for a fact I would do that. Do you remember when AEW was sponsored by Cracker Barrel for like 3 months, and then they did that match with Darby Allin, Jimmy Havoc, and somebody else, maybe Joey Janela,
It was Joey
and that
Janela.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that match led to Cracker Barrel never sponsoring them again.
I didn't realize I never kind of put that together, but yeah, you're right. They did never sponsor them again.
I remember watching that match because that was I don't know if that was the first time I saw that spot with the thumbtacks in the mouth, but it's the first I remember. I remember thinking, is Cracker Barrel aware that this is the match that they sponsor?
The first time I
And
remember seeing it was the Young Bucks against Joey Ryan and Candice LeRae and PWG in like 2014 or whatever.
I say I can't say I've never watched PWG. I watched one of the Bolas one year because when at one of the WrestleManias, somebody who knows, it could have been Excalibur, I don't even remember, but somebody was there selling PWG DVDs, and I saw the 3 discs of Bola. I think it may have been the 2012, 2013 Bola, because in my mind it was the New Jersey WrestleMania, which was 2013. And yeah, that was the one and only time I ever watched ever watched PWG. And it's kind of funny because like I wasn't even watching it when Dave was, marking out for it. But when I saw AEW was signing all the PWG guys, I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna at least find out what like this PWG style that Dave marks out for, since him marking out for New Japan made me a New Japan fan. And yeah, I gotta say, it I wasn't as impressed by it as Dave was, but you know, the as we've mentioned before, the original AEW roster was not, the 5-star roster that they would eventually get.
Yeah, I enjoyed a lot of PWG, but there was always an element of goofiness to it that turned me off.
Yeah. I mean, it's understandable.
I like I'm not saying no comedy in wrestling ever, but I like my wrestling to be wrestling that takes itself somewhat seriously.
I've mentioned this before, but the moment that Orange Cassidy jumped the shark for me was when they did the casino ladder match at the Double or Nothing 2020 show. And he's in this match to determine the number one contender to the world title. And the whole storyline of the match for weeks leading up to it, and even during the show, was he couldn't even be bothered to learn the rules to the match. I remember thinking, why would I care about him trying to win the match or the match itself when one of the participants is treating it like it doesn't matter?
Okay, I'm gonna defend that a little bit because I wasn't a big Orange Cassidy fan at first, and he's grown on me over time, and I really do appreciate him now. But the only way the character works is eventually you realize The not caring is a facade that he uses to fuck with his opponent's minds.
I get that. And I mean, it's been 5 years now and it's been drilled into your head. But this, I think this was his second match because he had the match with Pac at the Revolution pay-per-view, and that was his first match. And then the pandemic happened. And so this may have been his second match. If not, it was maybe his third in AEW. And so, yeah, it was established he didn't care, but it's like that's not the story that got told. The story was he didn't care enough to learn how to win the match to get a title shot. And that's what, turned me on him, or however you want to phrase that.
I would have to watch the match again to argue this any further.
Honestly, like, and I'm sure because I haven't watched it in forever either, but I'm sure, it was a fine match. And I'm sure as the match progressed, he actually learned the rules of the match, but it was just still, I don't know, like, we all have that moment where we have that moment where you dislike somebody no matter what, and that was mine for him. And that's not to say that he's not a really good wrestler, because he is. But, that moment was when I was like, ugh. And
Here's the thing. I think that comedy in wrestling is fine,
mm,
is acceptable, is even good at times when the heel is the butt of the joke. My
mm,
problem is when wrestling is the butt of the joke. Like when the whole joke is haha, isn't this wrestling bullshit fucking stupid? That's when I have a problem with it.
I completely agree. And, sometimes it's a fine line to walk, but yeah.
You know what never made wrestling the butt of the joke? Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
No. And in case this is the first time you've ever listened to this show, what we do here, it is really quite simple. We watch every single episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling, beginning with episode number 1 on February 1st, 1992, and we go all the way to episode number 200 on November 26th, 1995. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, the so-so, the all right, the amazing, the tremendous, the out of this world, the unbelievable, the unforgettable, the unremarkable, the one of a kind, the stuff you'll remember forever, the stuff you've already forgotten, and everything in between. We watch some matches, listen to some promos, and talk about some angles, and just have some fun talking about old school wrestling for about an hour. And then at the end of the show, I tell you what else is happening in the world of wrestling, because I can tell you July 17th, 1993, until I'm blue in the face, but this gives you some context to where you may say, "Oh, I remember that. Is that what was going on?" And Trey says, "Yes, yes, it was."
Yes, yes, it
And
was.
and actually, this week's "What Else Is Happening" has a nod to your other podcast.
Oh, right on.
Yep. But before we get to the end of the show, let's talk about the beginning of the show and go to our intro with Bob Caudle and Dutch Mantel.
Welcome to another exciting action-packed hour of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Professional wrestling the way it used to be and the way you like it. Hi, fans. I'm Bob Caudle, along with my tag partner right here is Professor Dr. Dutch Mantell. And we got a great hour in store for all you wrestling fans this week. We're going to see Brian Lee. He'll be in action right here. We're going to take a tape look at last week's title change, which occurred right here on Smoky Mountain Wrestling fans. You won't want to miss that. We're going to see Armstrong's Army. That's going to be a six-man tag team match. And Chris Candido against Tim Horner. That's going to be our big main event. And what about Down and Dirty this week, Dutch?
A special guest, or I should say several special guests. I'm going to be talking to Jim Cornette and his band of gentlemen on Down and Dirty with Dutch. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
You mean those outlaws, those criminals?
No, not my friend. We're going to get to the bottom of this Bob Armstrong attempted murder concept that he tried to do last week.
All right, now what about our TV match? You going to let me draw this week?
You want to draw?
Yeah, let me draw. Let me draw a name. All right, I'm going to try to find a name. Let me see who I can find. Let me look around. I'm going to stir them up, Dutch. I'm going to stir them up good.
Stir them up.
All right, I got them stirred up. Dutch, you're not going to believe this.
Who is it, Tim Horner or somebody?
No, you're not going to believe it, Dutch.
Who is it?
Look at there.
Hey.
Dutch Mantell.
Hey, that's me.
Dutch Mantell. That's your name.
Yes! I'm going to wrestle Bobby Blaze for $1,000. When am I on? What am
A
I?
little later in the hour, Dutch.
I'm gonna go get dressed right now. I'm gonna win me $1,000. I'll give you some of it.
I'll look forward to that. All right, fans. Right now, let's go to the ring.
It's amazing that, they beat the champ contest going on for 6 months, and this is the first time Dutch's name has been pulled.
I love the universal human experience of being incredibly generous with hypothetical money.
I
You
mean, to
could
be fair,
probably,
he didn't say how much he would share with him. It could just be like, I win $1,000, like it'd be $10.
I mean, if you want $1,000, at least buy me dinner.
I mean, 1993, $10 would, get you, something decent.
That's true. That's true.
So yeah, today we're gonna have Chris Candido, the WWA World Heavyweight Champion, against Tim Horner. Armstrong's Army is in a six-man tag, which, by the way, they don't mention like the obvious here, but that means that Bullet Bob Armstrong is going to wrestle on this show.
Yeah, I didn't quite realize that until it came out.
Like when they said it, I'm like, wait, Bullet Bob's wrestling? But I'm like, well, it'd be a six-man tag, so like, and the other four are two tag teams. So like, how would they work that? But yeah, and
But
Cornette's Criminals are going to be on Down and Dirty. And it's like, it's funny because when Dutch let Caudle pull the name, it was obvious something was up. So you know, I can't say I was surprised when Dutch's name got pulled, but it's like, yeah,
by the way, $10 in July 1993. Today would be 21.80. So that's like an entree at a mid-level place.
yeah. I mean, 21.80, like Jesus, I'm thinking of my local Chinese restaurant. I can get a lot of food today for $21.80 at our Chinese restaurant. And then
Oh
like
yeah.
20 minutes later, I'd be hungry again, but that's neither here nor there.
I know that's a trope. I've never fallen victim to that. I don't, are people not eating right? Do people not know how to eat?
Apparently not. I mean, to be fair, I'm usually pretty full from eating Chinese food. I don't get it, but maybe I'm just eating enough Chinese food to become full.
That's how you do it.
So, yeah. So our first match sees primetime Brian Lee debut a brand new theme song and his new manager Tammy Fitch as he takes on Jimmy Jannetty, who is one of those people who never really became anything, but if you were a wrestling fan in the early to mid 90s, you've heard his name a lot because he wrestled pretty much everywhere, in the independents in the 90s.
You know, the funny thing is like before I kind of knew better, I would always kind of conflate Jimmy Janetti with Jimmy Backlund, aka Jimmy Del Rey.
It's funny because like for a second I thought Jimmy Jannetty was Stevie Richards. Then I know Stevie Richards used a different name, but I blanking on what it is right now. But this is obviously not Stevie Richards.
No. By the way, Brian
Yeah.
Lee's new song "Back in the Saddle" by Aerosmith.
Yes, I actually wrote that down myself. So see, we're on the same page here. So
That's
Lee,
good.
even though he's a heel, primetime Brian Lee, followed the code of honor here. He shook Janetti's hand and then took his head off the clothesline. I mean, hey, they shook hands, so it was okay to do that, I guess.
Yeah,
Since
that's
Dutch was stretching and getting ready for his match, so Tammy joined the broadcast table to talk about how big and handsome primetime Brian Lee is. And he is a big, handsome man, you know?
indeed, indeed.
Yep. Lee won with a top rope knee drop. I'd say out of nowhere because I wasn't paying attention and had to rewind because like no one was reacting to it. And it wasn't until they counted three that I noticed.
So I just looked up Stevie Richards on Cage Match, and it doesn't. It just has his names as Stevie Richards, Steve Richards, Steven Richards, Doctor Stevie, and Big Stevie Cool. But
Okay.
under trainer, it's got that number. Most of this list is a who's who of the folks that we discuss over on my podcast, the Oh My Godcast, the likes of JT Smith, Larry Winters, Johnny Hotbody, Tony Stetson, and the Sandman. But you know who's first on that list of people who apparently trained Stevie Richards?
Who?
Jimmy Janetti.
Interesting.
Indeed. This was a match. It was fine. Brian Lee won in 2 minutes with a diving knee drop.
Yes. From here, we rewatch the angle where Tammy sprayed hairspray in Tracy's eyes and Primetime Relay beat him up last week. And then we come back to the desk where Bob Caudle is with Primetime Brian Lee.
We're right here now with Primetime Brian Lee and Tammy Fitch. Brian, people are still surprised and they're still shocked at the fact that you came under the wing of this young lady.
Surprised and shocked. Don't ever call this lady to say she has a wing. Never. This is my manager. You don't say anything about her unless I give you permission. Isn't that right, honey? And now, Tracy Smothers, I want to talk to you. You come out here and talk about how Brian Lee betrayed you, how Brian Lee did this. Tracy, listen. You're just like these simple-minded, coal-mining bumpkins up here in country land. You're nothing but a redneck. You were jealous of me the second week I was in this sport because he said he taught me what I know. I'll know more than you in 2 weeks, Tracy Smothers. And with this lady right here, I'm going straight to the top. I was the first Smoky Mountain heavyweight champion. You remember that, Bob? You better believe it. And all you coal-mining people out there remember it, too. Brian Lee was the first champion, and then when I had the belt stolen from me, everybody overlooked it. Now I'm going back for what's mine. And I tell you what, Tracy, you got $20,000 on your head, and you have that gold around your waist, and it's all going to be mine. Isn't that right, Tammy?
Brian, I'll tell you what. You win that title, and you'll get the biggest surprise you've gotten yet.
Primetime Brian Lee.
You know, we've said this before, but I always love when heels turn heel and it makes sense as to why they would. And Primetime Release pointed out now for weeks. He was a Smoky Mountain champion. He got robbed of the title, and nobody gave a fuck. Tracy gets robbed of the title, and it's like immediately Mark Curtis has to make an immediate decision to not, have Tracy lose the belt or not give the belt to White Boy and instead strip the belt. You know, when Sullivan murdered Brian Lee, no one ran in to help. Everyone ran in after the fact. He's making good points here, and if he wasn't with Tammy Witch with a B, things might be different.
All of his complaints seem completely valid to me.
So what do you think Tammy's biggest surprise ever will be if/when PTBL wins the belt?
Well, what surprises you think she's already given him?
Well, I mean, she bought him a car and she lets him live in her house and has a pool and all that. So, I mean, there's at least that.
Hmm. And we know that she at least likes to be in a bikini around the pool, but I don't know. We don't know enough about their personal habit. Well, I can guess quite a bit about Tammy's personal habits, but I don't know. What do you think? What do you think the surprise is?
I don't know. Has she slept with him yet?
I was trying to beat around the bush about that without saying it, and you just go right for it.
I mean, we are a very professional show. We would never insinuate that Tracy would be withholding sex, or I'm sorry, Tammy would be with sex. Tracy is also withholding sex from Lee, but Tammy especially.
We would never insinuate that Tammy Sitch was sexually promiscuous.
No, no, we wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
Um, Me fucking up there made me forget the segue I was gonna do because I had a pretty epic segue and now I forget it. Thanks,
Oh,
Tracy Smothers. You made me forget it.
thanks, Tim
We
Horner.
we were talking about sex. Yeah, I don't know. It completely slipped my mind.
What
All
if the
right. So
surprise? What if the surprise is a fax machine?
I I don't know, maybe Primetime Brand New would appreciate that. And my power just went out. Can you hear me, Trey? Trey, can you hear me?
All right, we back. All right, we
All
back.
right. Welcome back. Apparently, me forgetting what I was going to rant about led to the power going out on my entire block for about 5 minutes.
Surely this was our cosmic punishment for impugning the virtue of Miss Tammy Fitch.
Obviously, you know, if there is a God, she did not want us recording this show, and apparently thought I
No,
would go to sleep instead of, you know, forging on.
we are
The funny thing
very
is,
determined.
Zoom didn't even close. Like, and I was like, is Trey still on here? Like, how? Like Zoom was still open, and so I'm like, hello, hello, Trey, can you hear me? And you weren't there, obviously, you know.
Yeah, I was I was still on for like, I don't know, a minute or so, trying to like asking what was going on, and then the thing finally disconnected.
That that actually was about how long I kept it on. So who knows? Somehow we were connected, but we weren't.
We've always been
Well,
connected.
I felt that. I felt that. Well, let's go to a very stern-looking Tracy Smothers, who last week had hairspray sprayed into his eyes, and now he's got to talk about it.
All right, fans, right here now, the wild-eyed Southern boy, Tracy Smothers. Tracy, first of all, let me say I'm glad to see that you're able to see and that your eyes weren't permanently damaged with what Tammy Fitch did to you last week.
Well, you know something, Bob? To be back there and watch that monitor, trying to get my eyesight together and get my stuff together from last week, my vision has been blurred all week from that goofy hairspray. But to see a guy who I consider one of my best friends, Brian Lee, who's now nothing but a nothing happening prima donna, controlled by some two-bit huzzy leech from Wesley College up north somewhere with all them goofy Yankees. Tammy Fitch, Tammy Witch with a capital B if you get my drift. Young lady, I've been in this sport a long time, and I ain't never, ever had a woman slap my face. You play your hands on me again, you better be ready to take the consequences. I've never touched a woman in this sport, but I'm gonna make an exception with you. Primetime Brian Lee, you say you want the $20,000 bounty, and you want the Smoky Mountain heavyweight title. Well, you got to go through me to get the title, but remember this on the bounty. When you're in the Smoky Mountain area, in the East Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Eastern Kentucky, or all over. It don't matter. You gotta come through me, man. I'm the man. I'm the champion. I got something you want. You come and get it. When you're here in this area, you're the hunted, and I'm the hunter, big boy. I'm gonna be on you like a duck on a June bug, and that's the bottom line, Bob Carter.
All right, fans, right there from the champion, Tracy Smothers. And a
Now, Trey, you live in the South. What the hell is a June bug? And do ducks normally get on them?
You know, I was just about to say I am not a particularly outdoorsy person. I don't know if ducks have a particular fondness for June bugs or a particular disdain, as it were. I don't know.
Tracy is a big fan of that Tammy Witch with a capital B line. It's his rock and roll's here to stay. We ain't here to play.
He also really likes calling Brian Lee a prima donna.
Yes. Next week's show is taped in the same place. I wonder what funny little name he's going to have for them then.
I bet you $5 it's the same ones.
Oh, I'm not going to take that bet. I have I have a strong feeling of that. Now, his eyes were not permanently damaged from last week, but he has had vision problems since it happened over an hour ago. I mean, a week ago. And then he promises to hit Tammy Sitch, which makes you a baby face in this territory. I gotta ask you you know, if you threatened to hit your wife, would that make you a baby face in Texas today?
We're probably still gonna pop today.
Oh, wow.
Uh, Depends on the
Uh,
audience.
well, let's go to a Rock and Roll Express promo after we've recapped the tag team title change from last week, where the Bruise Brothers won the belts. Let's go to the Rock and Rolls right now.
All right, Rick, Robert, we just got to look again at what happened last week with those big guys, the Jim Cornette's, the Bruise Brothers, Rick.
You know, it seems like we keep on waking up with the same old nightmare with Jimmy Cornette. Now he's got the Bruise Brothers, somebody he can stand behind, somebody that he can talk real big and bad to. But let me tell you one thing, Jimmy Cornette. Now the Armstrong family has created the Army. They are going to take care of your heavenly bodies. And now it's up to us to take care of your Bruise Brothers because we don't care how big and bad they are. But the best thing about it all, Jimmy Cornette, is that we are saving you for Bullet Bob Armstrong himself. And I'm telling you, it's going to be sooner or later, and much sooner than you think, Cornette, because you got to understand one thing, Bob. He's the master of them all, and he's the baddest of them all. So you be ready, Jimmy Cornette, because like I told you many times before, rock and roll's here to stay. We're not here to play, and right now we're part of the Armstrong Army. All right.
I should apologize to Ricky Morton for stealing his promo for him there.
How dare you?
I know it was awful of me for doing that here.
How
But
well?
yeah,
How
mhm.
how could you have guessed that he was going to say rock and roll ain't here to play, we're here to stay? How could you have ever known?
I mean, Morton's only been here for a full year at this point. So I mean, I think he's only said it 52 times.
There's probably a couple weeks where he said it twice.
Well, that's how I got to 52 because he debuted at Fire on the Mountain in August of last year, and we're not quite
Ah,
there yet.
all right, that makes sense. I know he
Yeah.
said it in some of these local promos that I watch and you don't.
Every time I ever try to watch them, I'm given many reasons to skip them the next time.
I
But
mean,
by the way,
go ahead.
R Ricky's mad about having to still deal with Jimmy Cornette and how he's lost the belt. Like, motherfucker, it's your fault. No one made you accept the challenge from Cornette and the Bruise Brothers last week. You know?
I
You,
mean, he's a babyface. He's required by law to accept all challenges.
oh Lord, you wanna team up and take on the Rock and Roll Express?
We could. I think the key is because I've watched a lot of Rock and Roll Express matches. It seems like Ricky is the vulnerable one, so all we have to do is isolate Ricky and just beat him down, and we'll just sail straight to victory.
Yes. I mean, watching all these old wrestling matches made me wonder, why doesn't Robert Gibson just stay in the ring the entire time?
I, Robert Gibson doesn't strike me as a thinking fella. Strikes me as more of a doer than a thinker.
I was watching them versus Doom at Great American Bash 90, and I'm like, if I was a mean person, I would say that Robert Gibson was watching Butch Reed with one eye and Ron Simmons with the other eye. But I'm not that kind of person who would say that.
He always keeps one eye on the prize, doesn't he?
Indeed, he does. I forgot Dynamite was Tuesday night this week.
Yeah, I keep almost forgetting too. Hopefully, I remember tomorrow.
Literally, as we're talking, I'm scrolling through the daily update on the Observer site, and they were like, "Oh, tomorrow's NXT and Dynamite." I'm like, "Oh yeah,"
So
which
it's Title Tuesday, which is usually like a show that they put multiple title matches, very often a world title match. So this time they just kept announcing other matches, and I'm like, this is going to be a rib on me, isn't it? That they're going to do Title Tuesday with no title matches. And then I think just to fuck with me, they did one match for two titles because Mercedes
yes.
Moné is defending both the TBS title and the New Japan Strong Women's title against Emi Sakura.
Yes, 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 yes. And I'm sure Emi Sakura is going to win. Emi Sakura, who I don't think has ever won a match on AEW. Has she?
She has. She has. I expect that match will be quite good.
I mean, I'm not doubting the quite goodness of it. I'm just more like, we're watching a match that it's I mean, it's like the Battle of the Belts. It's like you know who's going to win, you know. I
The
mean, I know
last
there
Battle of the
were
Belts, the
Mhm.
last Battle of the Belts they did, because those shows have always been pointless, but at least it has always been like 3 to 4 title matches. And the last one had one title match and two like eliminator matches. I was so pissed.
Although that one title match did have a title change, which would have been impossible to not have one because it was for a vacant title, but
Yeah.
still. So Emi
You got
Sakura's last win in AEW at this point is a dark match on the October 25th, 2023 Dynamite taping in Philadelphia. She teamed with Marina Shafir, Nyla Rose, and Taya Valkyrie to defeat people named Gabby Ortiz, Kelly Maiden, Nat Castle, and Zuleika. Obviously, a very competitive 8-woman tag there.
I'm gonna choose to
Um,
believe you and not verify this because I don't care.
yes. Scrolling through, she has actually won quite a few times, but so far, every win I'm finding was her winning on Dark or Elevation.
Now she may she may not have ever won a match on one of the main shows.
Oh Lord, I'm back into 2022 right now, and so far, she's actually wrestled far more in AEW than I thought she did. But there's a reason for that because I never watched Dark after the first 6 months.
You
You
would
know,
not guess, I bet, what promotion she started with.
Stardom.
Oh no, no, Stardom didn't exist till 2011. She's been wrestling a hell of a long time.
Um, I, I don't know. You're telling me I would never guess, which makes me want to say WCW, but I know that's not it.
IWA Japan.
You're right. I would have never guessed that.
Yeah, it's funny because I knew that she had spent a lot of time in FMW, and I just assumed that she started in FMW, and then for whatever reason, I looked her up the other day, like, oh wow, she actually started in IWA Japan. That's even more random than I thought it was.
So I have an update here. Emi Sakura has won 2 matches on AEW television. The first was on the November 6th, 2019 Dynamite, where her and Jamie Hayter defeated Riho and Shayna. And then 3 weeks later, on the Thanksgiving Eve 2019 Dynamite, her and B. Priestley defeated Hikaru Shida and Chris Statlander.
Huh. By the way, I have another note about IWA Japan. I think the news dropped over the weekend or maybe late last week that IWA Japan is gonna close its doors this year, which was very surprising to me because I assumed that IWA Japan closed its doors 20 years ago.
I was, I don't want to say make the same joke, but the fact that they were still in business is shocking to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, apparently not
I,
anymore, or
I
not for much
can't say
longer.
that I thoroughly read, all of the non-New Japan Japanese notes in the Observer, but I don't remember him ever talking about IWA, literally ever, like in the past 20 years.
I don't think that IWA has been relevant since the King of the Death match in 1995.
That may like, hey, to most people that may have been when they closed the doors was the next day. You know,
I
when they only
did. I couldn't have told you any different.
when they only paid Cactus Jack $300 for the King of the Deathmatch tournament in front of 40,000 people. Like, hey, I wasn't doing the counting, but that sounds like the company ripped some people off.
At least he got a soda as a bonus.
Yes, you know, and I wonder if that soda's still sitting unopened, on wherever he put it.
I think he said a bathroom shelf.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, but I'm like, that's not right. But yeah, that sounds right.
If you're wondering what the fuck we're talking about, this is a story from Mick Foley's first book that came out 25 years ago about the day of the King of the Death Match when he asked the owner of the company, "This big house tonight, bonus," and he just laughed and said, "Here, bonus," and gave him a soda that he had just bought out of the machine.
And he never even got to keep his trophy.
I know that's the real tragedy of it. He set it down and never saw it again.
I gotta say, listening to that, it's not surprising to me that the company was still in business until recently. Since,
They
you know,
they
fuck,
melted down that trophy and it funded them for the next 30 years.
40,000 people, you can't even give the guy who killed himself in a match more than $300, and you wouldn't even give him the fucking trophy that he won.
Stingy, stingy, garbage wrestling promoters.
Yes. All right. So it's now time for the Beat the Champ TV title power generator, Bobby Blaze, to take on Dirty Dutch Mantel. And I'll be honest, I did not know where this was going to go. I honestly thought that Dutch was actually going to wrestle. And unfortunately, well, let's just have Dutch explain it. Let's go to Dutch right now in the ring.
Believe what happened to me. I was putting my boots on back there and I pulled a muscle in my leg and it hurts. But I tell you, when I need something, I went to my good friend Ron Wright and I told him what kind of predicament I was in, and he said he could have a replacement for me to meet Bobby Blaze today. And I'd like to introduce my replacement today. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand to the Mighty Yankee. Everybody stand up and cheer. Come on, Mighty Yankee.
This is a big deal. He was able to find a replacement on such short notice. He was able, like, not just a replacement, he was able to find a brand new wrestler into Smoky Mountain Wrestling to come in and challenge Bobby Blaze at a moment's notice for the Beat the Champ title.
I credit to Mr. Ron Wright for always being prepared.
Yes. And so, yeah, Dutch managed to pull a muscle in his leg while getting ready and tying his boots, which, they say old people, they start breaking down. And I'd say tying your boots and pulling a muscle would be, indication that Dutch may be getting old.
I would think so.
Uh, well, so we then go to Beat the Champ TV title hockey mask holder Bobby Blaze versus the Mighty Yankee with Mr. Ron Wright in his corner. Now, in addition to the wacky coincidence that, they just happen to find a wrestler backstage ready to go, Mighty Yankee is the same size and shape as Dirty White Boy.
And that was really good because he had to borrow his gear. He wasn't ready.
Oh, you see, I thought that this was his gear. He just was a big disciple of Dirty White Boy, so he got matching gear. He learned White Boy's moves, you know?
I
And
don't know what you're implying. They don't look anything alike. Dirty White Boy has a face, and this man clearly has a mask.
yeah, obviously, you know, Mr. America was not Hulk Hogan, brother, and the Mighty Yankee was not anyone we know. Um,
So
so
I'm
I,
having
I think
like I'm sorry.
hmm,
On the surface, the Mighty Yankee sounds like it might be a stupid name, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's a fucking great name.
is it better or worse than Dirty White Boy?
Nothing is better than Dirty White Boy.
So, I noted here, and this is kind of where it gets funny. Bobby Blaze got more offense in against the Mighty Yankee than he ever did the Dirty White Boy.
Yeah, he actually got to make a
Which,
comeback here.
yeah, Yankee though, I gotta say, we're talking about it, but he reminds me of someone. I think he'd make a great tag team partner of Dirty White Boy. What do you think?
You know, I hope they figured that out. Really hope that it works out for him. I'd hate for him to just wash out of wrestling and have to get a job as like a plumber or something.
That would suck. That would
Yeah.
suck quite a bit.
No
Um,
disrespect to all the plumbers who enjoy our podcast.
all 50,000 of you, I'm sure. You
Yeah.
all listen on the same feed. That's why we only have 26 listens. Um, so Blaze made his comeback, but Mr. Right slips a gimmick into Yankee's mask. Yankee headbutts Blaze and wins the TV title. A big deal for Yankee in his first match in the promotion to get a big win like that.
So it's just the mask now the TV title.
I, I mean, it might be, you know. We'll see, but Mighty Yankee's now $1,000 richer, and I wonder if, like White Boy, he's going to share his winnings with Mr. Ron Wright.
I would think he would have to, given that Mr. Ron Wright was the business connection that allowed him to break in, not only break into the wrestling business, but get a championship match on his first night.
So Bobby Blaze was laying on the mat, and then he was magically transported to the announce position. So let's go to Bobby Blaze to cut a promo about what just happened.
With us right now, Bobby Blaze. Boy, I tell you, some blow. That had to be a ringer. I'm convinced that was a dirty white boy in there, Bobby.
I know it was a dirty white boy in there. You know what, though? I was just excited to be the TV champion, and I knew it wouldn't last forever. I was more excited I had a chance in front of all these fans to defend my title. One thing I don't like, though, Bob, I didn't like being cheated out of my title. And dirty white boy, I know it was you, and I'll tell you what, you beat me, and I said you probably would beat me. One thing you didn't do, brother, you did not break my spirit, because I'm going to still come at you. You can't make me quit. You can't make me quit.
All right, fans, right from the mouth of Bobby Blaze.
All right, so now that I pressed unmute, um, Bobby Blaze somehow knows that the Mighty Yankees dirty white boy. And I mean, I don't know why you would say that. You know, dirty white boys never put a foreign object in his mask and headbutted anybody to win, you know?
Well, obviously the Mighty Yankee is a huge Dirty White Boy fan, so they wrestle very similar. So maybe that's why Bobby Blaze was confused.
I mean, Bobby Blaze might just be a very confused young man, and
You know,
unfortunately, mhm.
whenever he does an interview, I can just see by the look on his face that he's confused a lot of the time.
I should also note that there was no giant trophy behind him this week. I guess that explains things since, he lost the belt, so of course he wouldn't have a giant trophy there behind him at the desk.
Bob took his in between tapings, he took his best grandpa trophy and put it back in the car.
Between fucking interviews, because that trophy only was there for the one segment. I I actually did ask around, and there might be something next week regarding the trophy. So I don't want to spoil things, but things in this show may have been taped out of order.
I can't imagine.
I know. Well, anyway, he says White Boy did not break his spirit. I don't know why that's relevant in this situation, but he does say that White Boy will not make him quit, which says something because he's in the middle of losing 8 million matches to Dirty White Boy right now. But let's go to Down and Dirty with Dutch, who is standing by with Cornette's Criminals.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Down and Dirty with Dutch. I'm Dutch Mantel, and unfortunately, you're not. Joining me today, and I consider it an honor and a privilege, I have out here with me right now Jim Cornette, along with the Heavenly Bodies and the Bruise Brothers and Killer Kyle. And I want you to know, Jimmy, due to my professionalism, my leg is killing me.
I know that, Dutch, and I appreciate you coming out here and standing here interviewing me when you got an injury. I appreciate that dedication.
You know, it hurt me. I couldn't wrestle Bobby Blaze, but it worked out okay. What I want to say, Jimmy, and I very seldom say this, and I don't want to make a lot of commentary here, but what we saw Bob Armstrong do last week, in my opinion, my humble estimation, was nothing more than attempted murder. Then, after he did that, he threw a baseball bats and all that. He went under that desk, made an interview, And what he called you and these gentlemen here, Cornette's criminals.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what he did. Oh, Bullet Bob, fossilized dinosaur Bone Armstrong, comes in a ring with a deadly weapon, comes in a ring with a baseball bat. What he's going to do is he's going to clean house, he's going to beat up the Bruise Brothers and the Bodies and Kyle, and he's going to get to me. That's what he thinks. Well, let me tell you something, Bob Armstrong. You ought to know about criminals real well. You ought to know about Sheriff Buford Pusser real well, because I have it on good authority that your whole entire stinking family has been getting arrested in the states of Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee for the better part of 150 years. You are descended from garbage, and that makes you garbage. Your family's made up of gypsies, tramps, thieves, pickpockets, burglars, and assorted other scum and white trash. So what I'm saying to you, Bob Armstrong, don't bandy that word criminal about here. What you better do, Bob Armstrong, is you better open your eyes and you better take a look at the odds that you're facing. You got this ragtag army composed of your little pencil-neck sons and the has-been rock and roll express. And you're gonna put them up against the awesome power of the Bruise Brothers, the Smoky Mountain Tag Team Champions. And you're gonna put them up against the awesome power of the Heavenly Bodies, who have not only beaten every team in Smoky Mountain, but have gone around the wrestling world to other organizations and have beaten their best too. And then you're gonna try to match up with a man like Killer Kyle right here, who, if you want to talk about criminals, brother, has a past that you would absolutely shudder, that your knees would knock together, your knees would freeze, and your liver would quiver if you knew what Killer Kyle had done in the past. So what I'm saying to you, Armstrong's army is not going to be on the march. They're going to be on the retreat. Because if you want to call us criminals, well, brother, if we can rid the world of you, it will be my pleasure. So call us criminals. Cornette's criminals. That's what's going to happen. And the only thing that I'm upset about is the Smoky Mountain Wrestling would not let the Bruise Brothers give the Bodies the tag belts. But that still means that the Rock and Roll Express got to beat the Bruise Brothers to get them back, and that ain't going to happen. And as for you, Bullet Bob, one closing comment. You imagine yourself Sheriff Buford Pusser? Well, you know what happened to Buford Pusser, and you know where he is now. He's 6 feet under. Those criminals over there in McNairy County tinkered with his car. Well, Bullet Bob, if you bring that baseball bat near me one more time, brother, I'm gonna tinker with you, and so are all my men.
There you heard it, fans.
All right, so Jim Cornette does not like the fact that his men were called criminals, so he informed us that Bob's liver would quiver if he knew what Kyle had done, and then threatened to blow up Bob's car. That
I'm
seems
sorry.
perfectly logical.
Oh, where you insult the insult. This is where I insult my fucking self, I guess. This is where you insert the audio of just me saying typical Great Cornette promo.
It would save a lot of time, you know.
Yeah.
But he says that Bullet Bob's family has been arrested over and over again for 150 years. I was actually expecting him to specifically call out Brian Armstrong as a deserter, but no, he let Brian off the hook this time. Um, but yeah, that was it's hilarious. There's a 4 minute segment, and like we have like 30 seconds of stuff to say about it. Because I mean, Corny in 4 minutes can say about 35,000 words.
I mean,
I
a lot of it kind of just speaks for itself, right?
I did think it was funny that he mentioned the Heavenly Bodies have gone all over the world and wrestling the best teams in other companies because they haven't yet gone to the WWF. In fact, I don't even know if that's in the works yet as of when this was taped. Um, so it's like,
I don't
it,
think so.
yeah, like it's around this time, but yeah, I don't think it had officially been talked to and agreed to.
It's funny because like within the next year they'll be in the WWF, they'll be in All Japan. So maybe Corny was just predicting the future.
maybe maybe he has a TARDIS and can see into the future. Although if he was, you think he'd know that they were not world beaters when they traveled the world.
You think the TARDIS works on the same principles as the temporal ham radio that he uses to listen to our podcast?
I would think so. I mean, why wouldn't it?
I don't know much about theory of time travel. Sorry, I was a history major.
God damn it. Well, I mean, wouldn't you have used time travel to go back in history to study it further?
That would have been pretty cool and maybe easier.
Possibly. Possibly. Oh, though, I know Jodie Whittaker wasn't the best doctor ever, but my favorite episode of hers was the Rosa Parks episode,
Who is Jodie
especially with
Whittaker?
the 13th Doctor, the
Oh,
female.
oh, I'm sorry. I don't know anything about Doctor Who. It's I think I watched
Okay.
like 2 episodes of it one time. I never really got into it.
Well, since we've referenced the TARDIS multiple times, I just kind of assumed that you
I mean,
were a
everybody knows what the TARDIS is if you got any kind of cultural awareness.
some people do not have cultural awareness.
I pride myself on being culturally aware.
I I can almost guarantee if I texted my brother about the TARDIS, he would respond back by saying, "What the hell id the TARDIS?" and not realize we were making fun of him for saying id instead of is.
Huh.
Tr- True story. One time, my friend Lauren and I met Ben Kingsley at a Comic Con, and I texted my brother that, and he responded by saying, "Who the hell id Ben Kingsley?" and never picked up on the fact that we mocked him for that for years.
He's the fucking fake Mandarin.
I'm aware,
That's
you
that's
know,
like the only thing that I can name that Ben Kingsley was in.
but yeah, my brother is not culturally aware.
Well, that's unfortunate.
No, it's all right.
Sorry, that id unfortunate.
He is a good person nonetheless, you know.
Well, that id good.
Yes, it id. Wonder how much longer we can go with that.
I can't do it much longer. It takes a lot of effort.
Okay. All right. So with that out of the way, we go to an announcement that Kevin Sullivan's lawyers are trying to force Smoky Mountain Wrestling to air tape of Sullivan murdering Wing Kanamura in Japan.
I hope they
Now,
do it. I want to see this footage.
now you mentioned that that never happened, so I'm kind of like I'm more
That's
curious.
why I
Like,
want to see it.
I just love the idea that somehow his lawyers are going to force them to air footage of a match in Japan. It's
Uh,
like it's bad enough that these lawyers somehow forced Smoky Mountain to allow Kevin Sullivan to wrestle matches on their show, but how can they force them to air Japanese footage? Because wouldn't that require them to lease the footage from FMW or whatever, or Wing actually, it's not FMW, it's Wing.
I mean, they showed that clip of the fire match from Wing over and over again, so there must be a connection there.
Very true, but I mean, Wing may want more money than you'd expect. And if Wing wants to overcharge, does that mean Smoky Mountain has to pay for it because Kevin Sullivan's lawyers have somehow forced them to do so? Or would Sullivan have to pay for it because, it's he's the one demanding it get aired?
Well, I mean, it depends on how good the lawyer is. Are we talking Jerry McDevitt or are we talking Stephen P. New,
I mean, you picked two allegedly very good lawyers.
if you say so?
I mean, I haven't sat down and studied both of their case history, but I mean, Jerry McDivitt, you know. represented Vince for decades, and Stephen P. New is, you know, from all accounts, he's a very talented lawyer at the very least, even if, he does sponsor a podcast that isn't ours.
You think you think Jerry McDivitt knew some stuff and that's why he retired from being Vince's lawyer? You think he knew some shit was coming?
A, yes, but B, how fucking old is he? Like, I mean, I kind of assumed that he is, in his 70s and like, you know, even in a best case scenario, he wouldn't want to fucking do that. Um, 1 second here. How old is this man? He was 73 a year ago, so he's 74 now. So I
The
mean,
math works
I,
out.
I think it's time for Jerry to enjoy his retirement, even if
It's pretty
his primary client ne didn't even know the word until he paid Christy Hemme a shit ton of money and it came out.
it's pretty cool when they got him on Dark Side of the Ring.
I know, like that was like I mean, like, he's not an employee of WWE. He can do whatever the hell he wants to do, obviously, but it's still wacky because you associate him with WWE, and he was the first and I believe only WWE, I don't say WWE representative, but somebody that you would associate with WWE, to do one of those shows.
Yeah, that was cool.
Indeed. Thank you, Jerry McDivitt, for doing that.
Maybe he could sponsor our podcast.
If he's retired, I don't know what the hell he'd do, but sure. Jerry
We
McDivitt, if you're
can
listening, please consider sponsoring our podcast.
we can do a tune to the Mid-South Wrestling theme. Jerry McDivitt, Jerry Mc. I don't know. I'm not the
Oh,
musical
God.
one.
Do, 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 do. Jerry McDivitt. 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 Hi there, hello, and welcome to another action-packed, exciting hour of Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce. Another outstanding hour we have for you on today's show. The Junkyard Dog will be in action, as will the Mid-South Tag Team Champions Magnum TA and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And joining me, as always, is a man who every time he's in the area, we receive more cards and letters than anybody else to ask him to be on this show. And welcome the Oklahoma Stampeder, Cowboy Bill Watts.
I was hoping it was going to be Buddy Nichols.
The man who made wrestling what it is today, which
Buddy
if you hate
Nichols,
wrestling,
exactly.
it's Buddy Nichols. Mike Sampson, Robbie Eagle, and not that Jeff Daniels took on Armstrong's Army next. And yes, this is Bullet Bob Armstrong's first match in Smoky Mountain. And it's like, it's weird that, like, I know they plugged Armstrong's Army in a six-man tag at the end of last week's show, but you would think, like, they would have made a bigger deal about this.
You would think so. I may be wrong. I think I was looking at this the other day and he might have done a house show before this, but maybe I'm mistaken.
I mean, he probably did. I mean, it was around the same time that they started doing the house shows. But I mean, still, it's like this is Bullet Bob wrestling his to the majority of the audience, wrestling his first match on TV, and it was like in passing, they mentioned the group, but didn't even, hammer home that he'd be in the match himself.
So here's a weird thing. I don't know why this is, but if you look at this episode of Smoky Mountain Wrestling on Cage Match, it has the Armstrongs against Jeff Daniels, Mike Sampson, and Robbie Eagles match listed as a dark match. The lights were on, right? I didn't have a fever dream that this match happened on TV.
We were not talking about Tammy Fitch promiscuousness. So yeah, this was definitely a lights on match.
I
Um, so Bullet Bob had to save the match from being killed by his dull son Steve. He gives Samson a thrust to the breast before leaving the ring to his ugly ass kids. At this point, Ron or Don Harris meandered to the ring to stand in the corner of the jobbers. Jimmy Del Rey then came out because two managers are better than one. Don or Ron then came out next. Bullet Bob is very upset that these three people who were not in the territory when he got his ass kicked are at ringside. That's important to note. The Harris brothers and Jimmy Del Rey were not in Smoky Mountain Wrestling when Bullet Bob got his ass kicked. What is his big deal with them?
He watches the show. It's been established in the canon because he saw what they did to his sons that one week. He watches the show. He knows what's up.
I didn't think he had time to watch a show while he was rehabbing his injury. Plus, it doesn't matter what they did to his kids. Like, why is he taking it so personally that Jimmy Del Rey has a problem with his kids that he has to wrestle them now?
You can watch TV while you lift weights.
Dave Meltzer did it. That's why he's so jacked.
Yeah, because those
Um,
fucking long ass raw commercial breaks.
just those long ass Raws. Um, Dr. Tom came out, so the heels now have four managers, and Killer Kyle just came out to make it an even five. Having five managers, however, did not help because Bob somehow had a sleeper on both Eagle and Daniels at the same time, and then Samson somehow got pinned. Um, the five managers hit the ring for a 5-on-3 beatdown. Cornette beat up referee Flash Morris, which I'll be honest, I wanted to do that too. Cornette hit Bob a few times with the tennis racket before Rock and Roll hit the ring with a baseball bat.
If you're keeping records, the finish was Scott pinning Sampson after he and Steve did the assisted drop kick.
Okay, then. Thank you for letting us know that.
You're welcome. That's my job on this here podcast.
Well, my job is to sing the theme song for our next participant. Thunder rolls and the lightning strikes.
You haven't got to
White
do that in a
lightning.
while, have you?
I mean, honestly, I skipped it a few times for some reason. So yeah, because he wrestled 2 weeks ago, but alas, I forgot to sing.
What a
So we then
travesty.
get yeah. So we now have WWA World Heavyweight Champion Suicide Blonde Chris Candido versus yes, White Lightning Tim Horner. Horner threw a foam lightning bolt at the fans and then asked all of his fans to call Candido a crybaby. I'd say what an asshole, but that would imply Horner has fans. Uh, Horner did the
Oh.
worst suicide dive of all time. Now, I'm not saying I would do any better, but I'm not a professional wrestler. Horner literally steps between the ropes. Almost his entire body is on the apron at this point, and that's when he dives onto Candido. Um, I noted Mark Curtis was the referee, which should not have been allowed since he was the referee during their last match, and there's a degree of biasness. And it's possible he wasn't supposed to be. It may have been Flash Morris, but Flash just got his ass kicked during the last match, so it kind of makes sense.
I have to call
Um,
shenanigans on something. On the episode of Eastern Championship Wrestling that aired 11 days before this on July 6th. There was a big brawl, and Sir Christopher Candido of the Suicide Blondes got his arm stomped on by some baby faces, and it was broken. And he, in fact, appeared on the show that aired 3 days after this, July 20th, with a cast on his arm, and used it to help Sir Jonathan Hotbody and Sir Richard Michaels regain the tag team championship from the Super Destroyers. But here, he had no cast on his arm at all, so something's rotten in Denmark.
well, you see, this show was taped back in June.
Shows were taped back in May.
Well, if it was taped back in May, it's been 6 weeks. That's enough time to be out of a cast, isn't it?
I don't know. Never broken a bone because I'm not a brittle bone bitch.
Neither have I. And I got to be honest, in all the times I watched Rookie of the Year, I don't remember how long Henry Rowengartner was in that cast, which somehow gave him the ability to throw a baseball really fast.
I
It's
think I
best to
saw
not.
that movie,
Yeah.
but it's been like it would have been like right after it came out, so it's been like 30 years ago probably.
It's best not to overthink, children's sports movies from the 90s, because that could be an entire podcast on its own. But Henry Rowengartner retires from the Chicago Cubs after they somehow win the World Series in the 90s. And then he retires so he can go play Little League Baseball. I feel like it's probably illegal to have a Major League Baseball pitcher play Little League after the fact.
I talk about a ringer. How does that? I don't. Now I feel like I need to watch this movie just to figure out what the fuck is going on.
I mean, I know I'm going to speak over your head here a little bit because, I mean, although you may actually remember this because it was a bit of a news story, if Danny Almonte got busted for playing in Little League when he was like 14 years old and they tried to pass him off as 11, I'd like to think a former Major League Baseball pitcher cannot just play Little League after he retires, even if he is 11 years old.
Hey, this is on Disney Plus. All right, I can watch this. I'll watch this and be back with some analysis, or I'll just forget that we even had this conversation.
I was going to say, watch this, The Mighty Ducks, and Air Bud, and then we can discuss why a Minneapolis newspaper devoted multiple front page articles to a Pee Wee hockey team and how a dog is not really allowed to play basketball.
Is it like The Sandlot where there's an unreliable narrator?
Pretty much.
Thought so.
So this is all more interesting than Tim Horner, and specifically a fucked up spot here. And I honestly, and I'm sorry to say this, I think this fucked up spot was Candido's fault. Horner whips Candido into the ropes for a back elbow, but Candido, I think he forgot the spot because he grabs the ropes to stop himself, which was what the next spot was, and Horner basically walked into him with an elbow. Um, because seconds later, Horner whips him to the ropes again, and Candido grabs him again, so Horner drop kicks the air, but then Horner wins with a sunset flip. And to show you how much respect I have for Tim Horner, I first wrote that Candido won, then I deleted that and wrote that Smothers won before I got re-disappointed because Horner won. And then Candido threw a temper tantrum.
That temper tantrum was probably the best part of this. It was
Indeed.
fine. There was a wonky spot. It was funny. I remember that spot now that you mention it, but then like at the time, it didn't even register enough for me to write anything down about it.
Yeah. So let's go to the show closing promo with Armstrong's Army with Bob Caudle.
All right, fans, with us right now at ringside. Here's Rock and Roll Express, Armstrong's Army right here, Bob. It looks like Cornette is going to go to any league. He's got a bunch of criminals now that he's got under his arms.
The criminals failed. They tried to take me out again, but these old ribs healed and hardened up, brother. You didn't get the job done. Now, a famous president one time said, walk softly and carry a big stick. Well, I'm tiptoeing and carrying a Louisville slugger, and I intend to put it over your head like a jackhammer till I put you so far into the ground, ain't nothing but your head sticking up, and I'm going to kick a three-point field goal with you, big boy. Now, I'll tell you this, rock and roll is in the Armstrong Army right now. Thank you, boys. I appreciate all you can do for us. Scott and Steve are here, brother. We are rolling. When the Army rolls, boy, people sit up and take notice. What you gonna tell Mama now? Oh, bullets back. What's he gonna do to me? All you gotta do is stick around through the summer blast, and I'll show you what I'm gonna do to you. Because I'll tell you this, when you bring that racket up against the Louisville Slugger, you gonna come out on the short end of this big stick, my big boy. So bring your criminals on. The Army's gonna lock them up. And when we lock them up, you pay the prices.
Armstrong family tradition. Pay what you owe, and we owe you plenty, brother, and we're gonna pay you in full, right, rock and roll?
You got that right. Only thing I can say, Bob, is when the Armstrongs and the rock and roll get together, all we do is create stormy weather.
All right. What about it, Scott?
I just want to say one thing. Mama Cornette, Sue-wee, Sue-wee, you big fat pig, Jim Cornette, you gonna get it, brother. It's just a matter of time, and you going down at the hands of Armstrong's army, brother.
All right, fans, so that's got to wrap it up for this week.
Why do they let anyone other than Bullet Bob or Ricky Morton talk?
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Oh my God. Bullet
Like,
Bob is tremendous.
again, Scott, like, I mean, I don't know, because I don't think I've ever really heard Scott cut a promo, but it's like, really, is all he can say is that Jim Cornette and his mom are fat?
It would appear so.
And if I remember, I'm sorry, that was Steve who was saying that. Because, yeah, I don't think I've ever heard Steve Armstrong cut a promo. And then, Scott, when he was Dixie Dynamite, I can't say he was setting the world on fire with his promos, but he wasn't, calling all of his opponents fat. But he's rubbing off on him instead of Bob rubbing off on his kid.
Awful lot of fat shaming from the baby faces on this show.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. But honestly, like, even with the wonkiness throughout the show at different times, I thought this was a better show than we've been seeing for the last few weeks.
I
You know,
enjoyed the show.
it seems like every taping, there's the one show that has like two or three matches announced and they're all job matches. And then like the one week there'll be like, several theoretically competitive matches booked on the show. And you're like, why didn't they spread the wealth here? Why didn't one of these happen last week when we were, presented like, yeah, it didn't happen that way, but we were presented with the Rock and Roll Express having a job match and our Beat the Champ jobber wrestling another jobber.
Yeah. I will say that I thought it was a tremendous line when Bullet Bob referenced the famous Theodore Roosevelt speak softly and carry a big stick and followed it with I'm tiptoeing and carrying a Louisville Slugger. Tremendous line.
That was, and I like the part where, he said that they pay what they owe and they owe a lot. And if I was Jim Cornette, I would not be booking myself with this man anytime soon.
You would if you needed to draw a house.
Apparently. Well, that wraps up the show. Next week is allegedly highlights of Summer Blast. We'll see what that entails, whether that's like the whole show minus the Beat the Chant match, or that's just like the occasional highlight. Have you watched next week's show yet?
I have not.
Okay. So who knows? It'll, be at some point, I guess. But so before we wrap things up and go home, let's talk about what else is happening in the world of wrestling. Because, hey, it's July 17th, 1993. So let's tell you what else is happening. WCW held their Beach Blast show this week, headlined by Sting and British Bulldog defeating Sid and Vader in the main event when Bulldog pinned Vader to set up future world title matches. It drew 8,600 people, which sounds great, except there was only 4,000 paid for $33,000, which, as a reminder, the mini movie that they shot with a midget blowing up Sting's boat cost more than twice that much to make.
So I watched the show maybe a week or so ago. It's I don't know. There's some good on the show. I just take this information and interpret it how you will. The best match on the show involved Paul Roma.
I mean, Roma is, not terrible. I mean, he's not somebody that I would be putting in the position that he's in here in WCW. But, Paul Roma was an all right worker.
It was and I thought the Sting and Davey Boy against Vader and Sid match overachieved given, the people involved. The Ric Flair Barry Windham match underachieved. I do not blame them for that. They only had 11 and a half minutes,
Well,
which,
allegedly the finish may have been botched because from what I hear, that wasn't supposed to be the finish, and the referee called it.
huh. Well, yeah, what I was really disappointed in with so they had a 30-minute Iron Man challenge between Rick Rude and Dustin Rhodes, and I'm like, oh, this will be a good, great match, and it was so fucking boring.
Yeah. Dave pointed out in the Observer that Rick Rude does not have the repertoire for a 30-minute match like this, especially when they were only doing two falls.
Yeah, so that was really disappointing. The Hollywood Blondes, Arn Anderson and Paul Roman match, like I said, was very good. Uh, one of the better matches on the show was Lord Steven Regal versus Eric Watts, but that was entirely because look, I have determined that William Regal could lead a corpse through a believable chain wrestling sequence, and that led me to the conclusion that a corpse is more useful than Goldberg.
Lordy, 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 lordy. I, I mean, that also was, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and defend Goldberg because that match, blew many, many goats. But Mr. Regal was also at the peak of his drug abuse at this point.
That's true.
Um, so Terry Funk was allegedly in the process of being offered the position of WCW Booker, while Randy Savage is being rumored to being added to the WWF booking committee. Neither of those things happened, just in case you're curious.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes. And then the SummerSlam 93 card was released. So I'm not sure where Dave got this lineup, and I mean, I'm not doubting that this is what, he got told. But so the SummerSlam 93 card, the the top four matches did go off as he reported. Yokozuna versus Lex Luger, Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler, Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez, and Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Perfect. Although to be fair, watching the show, you could figure that out. But, either way, after that, he reports an undercard of Money Incorporated versus Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid. Those were two singles matches. The Steiners versus the Head Shrinkers for the tag titles. Doesn't happen. Doink 1 and Doink 2 versus Crush and Marty Jannetty. That really doesn't happen. Adam Bomb versus Tito Santana. Neither are even on the show. And a mixed tag with Tatanka and Sensational Sherry versus Bam Bam Bigelow and Luna Vachon. But Dave notes that Sherry just got fired, so that match won't be happening as planned.
Huh. Yeah, I mean that made sense according so I've been watching Raw and like that match has definitely been built to the like I can see where you might assume it was going to be Money Inc. against Razor and the Kid, but then it ends up being split into two singles matches and
I, I think it was split into two singles matches because Ted DiBiase was leaving, and so they wanted to have him on his back and didn't want to muddy it with a tag match.
well, that's valid.
Although, I mean, watching Raw, do you see any indication that they'd be doing Adam Bomb versus Tito Santana?
No.
Well,
I don't
and
think
then Mhm.
I don't think Tito is very long for the territory, is he? He's going to be in ECW before too long, briefly, at least for
I,
a taping.
I'm gonna say I think he's in ECW in a few weeks. And speaking of ECW,
Hmm.
Eddie Gilbert has allegedly purchased 49% of ECW from Todd Gordon and is negotiating to bring in Coco Beware, Tito Santana, and Stan Lane for the next TV taping. Big Boss Man and Sensational Sherry are going to be here in the fall, and he has commitments from Abdullah the Butcher, Stan Hansen, Shane Douglas, and to quote Dave, and a few wrestlers from Wing.
And if you want to know which of those end up happening, join us over on the Oh My Godcast at ohmygodcast.com.
I mean, here's what I know. I know Coco Beware does not go to the land of the extreme. I'm pretty damn sure Stan Lane doesn't. I'm 90% sure Boss Man doesn't, but I believe the rest of them are at the very least booked. Because I don't think Sensational Sherry actually shows up, but she is booked for, I think, November to Remember.
Yeah, sounds right.
All right. So now that I've spoiled the next 5 months of the Oh My God cast, what tell us about the show
Okay, so what week is this? We're I think
next
we did
week.
a show okay, so this week is next week, which means we did a show last week. And I don't know. Is it good? I don't know if it's good or not. We talked about Eddie Gilbert being almost kind of like Hitler, but not quite that bad. We talked about random matches that you would have never even imagined actually happened, like the Sandman having a very clean chain wrestling match with Ivan Koloff. We discussed whether or not the Russians knew
Wait,
the Soviet
wait,
Union had collapsed in 1993.
wait, wait. Time out. Rewind. So you said the Sandman had a chain wrestling match with Ivan Koloff. Just to clarify, he had a scientific match with Ivan Koloff, or he had a chain match with Ivan
No,
Koloff.
the Sandman and Ivan Koloff had a scientific wrestling match to determine the top contender for the Magnificent Morocco's ECW heavyweight title.
Every word you just said there sounds very wrong.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Also, there are some tag team championship matches, which I already at least spoiled one of earlier on this show. There's a very offensive portrayal of the disabled community. There's a profound lack of quality control. Todd Gordon is sick of everyone's shit. Terry Funk is great, and Eddie Gilbert is not quite as bad as Hitler.
Well, that's good. Uh, I'm happy Eddie Gilbert is not as bad as Hitler.
Not quite.
Oh my God. I thank you for bringing up Hitler. So, my racist ex-boyfriend, um, after I got arrested back in April of 2020, him and I were hanging out shortly afterwards, and he informed me that because I was arrested, I was worse than Hitler because Hitler had never been arrested. Now,
Yes, he was. There's
okay, yes, ignoring the fact that
uh,
yes, Hitler was arrested at one point.
he
Um,
wrote Mein Kampf in prison.
the fact is that I was dating a man who was so dense that he thought that he was shocked that I was offended by this. He could not understand why I would be offended by him telling me that I was worse than Hitler.
You dated this man, and you won't even give the guy who's very sexual a chance.
No, I will not give the very sexual man a chance.
But he's into pleasing women.
I, it's hilarious because if anybody actually listens to this show, I take the time to explain what the hell we're talking about. But no one listens, so who cares?
I sure don't.
Um, but yeah, and by the way, the worst part is I did not dump him then. We stayed together for 8 more months.
Oh, honey, you got. I hope you're making better choices now.
I did the day after Valentine's Day 2021.
So
Um,
you kept him around till Valentine's Day.
Pretty much. Um, he lucked out because that was when I was clinically depressed, and he was one of the few people I had in my life at the time. So he bought, I always say he bought 6 months more than he should have, but I mean, he bought at least 8 months more since the Hitler comment came in like June.
So you weren't Eddie Gilbert is not quite that bad, but you are in fact worse than Hitler.
Yes. Yes.
You sure can
Oh,
pick them.
Lord. Yes, I can, can't I? Well, now that we're done talking about my love life, that's going to do it for this week's show. I hope you all enjoyed it. I have no idea how long the show is yet because we had that little power outage earlier, but I'm going to edit it together into one nice little show. And I hope the three people who listen to it enjoy it, along with the 50,000 lawyers who listen to it on one player. And take care, have a fun rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
Bye.